Righty. Welcome. I am Heather Pierce Campbell, the legal website warrior. I'm an attorney and legal coach based here in Seattle, Washington, serving entrepreneurs throughout the US and around the world. Welcome to another episode of Guts, Grit, and Great Business. I'm so excited to bring you Karen McCall today. So Karen, I've known for probably over a year and a half now, maybe. And you are just going to love her work and her business, her mission in the world. It's phenomenal. I'm a huge fan of what she's up to. She's created some really neat solutions for people, especially in the personal finance and business finance space. So I'm really looking forward to sharing Karen with you today. Welcome, Karen.
Thank you, Heather. It is so lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So Karen McCall, if you don't know Karen, you're going to love this bio. At 78 years old, Karen McCall is nowhere near done yet. A published author of 8 books, a sought-after speaker, and a money expert featured in Forbes, Entrepreneur, Money, and USA Today, Karen is the founder of the Financial Recovery Institute and the world-class money coach training program. She is also the creator of MoneyGrit, a money management software, her second, that meets the needs of the family CFO as well as the small business owner. Karen is a trailblazer in the field of money coaching. In 1988, when she left corporate America and began her second career, there were only debt consolidators and credit counselors. Recognizing a need in the market for the deep emotional work required to rewrite your money story, Karen quickly became a sought-after money coach. The suits in the room called her signature system of saving your way out of debt unorthodox before concluding that she was indeed onto something. 33 years later, she has trained hundreds of money coaches with the financial recovery philosophy, giving them the foundation for lucrative and thriving businesses as they help others find financial freedom. With her live training, online courses, and software program, she continues to transform the lives of thousands of people worldwide as she further explores the psychological impact of money. Karen is a fellow Washingtonian, so I feel like, you're just down the street from me. We're probably a couple hours away, but Karen, I'm so excited to have you here. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm so excited about being here. I just think of you as kind of like my new best friend, because even though I've been in business for 33 years, I neglected some things like the legal things that I should be paying attention to and training other coaches. And I spoke to a woman a couple of years ago. She recommended you, and I just feel so much better about my business that we've done all this. And I'm glad that some of the coaches are working with you now, to get all of their legal stuff in place. Thank you.
Well, I love that. Thank you so much for that feedback. How you feel now is how I want everybody to feel about their business, right? It's another gentleman that I worked with described it. He's like, we finished up a whole bunch of work for him. And I said, how do you feel? And he said, I feel like I've taken off a 50-pound backpack that I didn't know I was carrying around. Right. And that's, things like legal, truthfully, things like finances, right? They can do that to us. We can have this. It's a little bit like, in the personal coaching world, I think it's called tolerations, the things that we should, like, they say, don't should on yourself, but we all have lists of, I should be doing this, whether it's in regards to health or business or finances. And that collective weight, we can carry that around for a while before we get it tackled.
Yes, absolutely. And it can be scary for people to think about. I know, here I'm going to be talking today about things to do in your business to be super, successful and to feel good about it. And hey, we're not perfect, right? Here, 32 years later, I've just dealt with this in the last year and a half with Heather. And one of the things that stops us is it seems like it's going to be way more complicated. And I don't know if you remember this, but when we had one of our meetings, and of course it was during COVID, so it was on Zoom, my husband, who is a retired attorney, when we hung up, he said, oh, that was the best talk I've ever had with an attorney that didn't feel like an attorney, meaning, because attorneys make everything so complicated. And for you, it was just, you took time and you found out what our needs are, and you just made it so easy. And I think people are afraid of lawyers. And I can say that because I know I always have to say, my husband's a really sweet guy before I say to people that he's an attorney.
Right.
Because you guys can get a bad rap.
Well, we can get a bad rap. And the other challenge with law is, one, it can be complex. It can be really hard to break down and understand. And the model itself, I call it the black box legal model, right? It lives inside of a black box, and it can be hard for people, including small business owners, to get inside that box. And, I think some of us have the heart of a teacher, and that's how I feel, is that, I really enjoy teaching things in a way that help them make changes for the better, right? My true insides are just immensely elated when people are living their best lives and they're successful in business, right? And so for me, being able to teach concepts in a way that feel like, that's my whole goal in my business, is that I want law and legal support specifically to feel accessible, to feel doable, to feel clear and empowering. And I think this probably translates into what you do from the financial side, right? It's all about,
Absolutely.
Providing clarity. And here's the roadmap. And here's how you get from point A to point Z, and it doesn't have to be that hard if you do it the right way. So thank you for that. It really means a lot to me. But I think, it's the goal of any of us in business to be able to do that for our clients, because whether it's your financial world, whether it's personal finances, business finances, that can feel out of reach to some people, and it can stay out of reach for a while. So talk to us about where your relationship to money or finances really started, right? We all come in, and I think our early roots in life can really strongly influence how we feel about money, how we approach money. Share a little bit with the listeners where your story starts in relation to money.
I'll start kind of far back. As a little kid, I grew up really poor. My father, I didn't live with my mother or my father. I lived with my father for a short period of time. And so I had a lot of insecurity in my life. And I also was a really sick kid. I was in the hospital for many years with polio during the polio epidemic. Thank goodness I wasn't left with any paralysis. I had a kidney disease and had kidney surgeries. And so really rough start. And in those days, we didn't have tutors. So I didn't go to school until 4th grade. And they just put me in school. And so I really grew up thinking that I probably wasn't very smart, because it was really tough to enter school at that time with, living with either foster family or my aunt and uncle. And so I really suffered a lot in terms of just not having a lot of confidence. And in terms of money, oh my gosh, that was just something that as soon as I was a teenager and could babysit, I started babysitting, being the best babysitter in the world, because I knew that I needed to have more money than I had. I knew I wanted to look better. I just knew that I just had this strong desire to have a better life, than what and so that was pretty darn young. So even though I had that early interest, what happened is I got married young, and I had 2 daughters right away, and my husband handled the money. And the message for women in my era, and I'm sure other women have gotten this as well, is you just need to make money to subsidize your husband's salary. It's like, he's really the breadwinner, but you're going to work the same number of hours, but you're not going to get the benefits, and you're not going to get the pay for sure. So I worked for 15 years, graduated from high school, worked in a dental office, no benefits except a paid vacation and a little bit of a Christmas bonus. Never occurred to me that there was anything wrong with that at all. However, let's fast forward several years, right? My kids are both in college, and I'm working by this time. I'd gone to school. I got married another time, and my husband was a professor and really encouraged me to go to college. And that was a huge, huge, huge thing during the women's movement, to start at community college and get my education. And I just loved it because there were a lot of reentry women at that time, right? However, through this whole thing, my second husband, guess what? He handled all the money. He was the breadwinner, which was great while I was in school. But then when I decided to get divorced, see, when you get married, when you're old, you may have 2 or 3 marriages, right? So, so divorced that man and decided that I needed to get a job. My daughter was in school in San Francisco. I was living in Sacramento. And I just loved visiting her in San Francisco. So Yellow Pages, and ads in the newspaper, the San Francisco Chronicle. I saw there was an ad to sell computer systems. So I called somebody and said, what's hardware and what's software, when I went for this interview. But anyway, I got in with, at the time, the second largest computer company in the world. They sent me off to a 6-month training, which was fabulous. And I thought I had it made, absolutely had it made by this time, right? And I forgot one point when I went through my second divorce and I got my divorce settlement, which was a lot of money at that time. I just stuck my head in the sand and did nothing except spend it. And my dear uncle said to me, hey, are you investing your money in mutual funds? And I was way too embarrassed to tell him I didn't know what a mutual fund was. So I just said yes. I never asked for help. I felt that I should know. And I hid the fact that I knew absolutely nothing about money. So I went to work for the second largest computer company in the world, got a company car, had a great office, the 32nd floor of a big, round, beautiful building in San Francisco. And if you would have seen me, you would have thought, wow, this woman is an amazing success. Had the suit, the briefcase, the whole look. The secret was, and it was a dirty little secret, and nobody knew, I was on the verge of eviction. I had the IRS hounding me from, not paying taxes on that money that I got. Everything just went in a big bowl on top of my refrigerator. So that's how it all started, and then one day I came home from work and here was an eviction notice. And I thought, okay, tonight is the night. I have to bring down that bowl and I have to face the music. And I was dating a guy at the time that would bring me these big stacks of self-help cassettes. And so I went to that little pile and I pulled out one by Robert Schuller on possibility thinking. And I plugged that in and opened a bottle of wine and sat there. And that was really the start for me of saying, okay, you are living in a money coma and you have to wake up.
Yeah, that story, I mean, wow, it's, there's a lot in there. And I think that there's a lot in there that people can relate to, right? None of us plan for divorces. None of us plan for job loss. None of us plan for certain things that happen that, are super relevant to our money story. And yet, and in fact, I was just talking with a guy on the podcast who, same thing, built a business, went through 2 divorces, found himself at age 50, like basically with nothing financially, right? And deciding like, I have got to figure this out. Otherwise I'm living on dog food or tuna fish the rest of my life.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of people that kind of have that, for lack of a better term, that come to Jesus moment of like, oh my gosh, I've got to really look in the mirror, look at my money, figure this out.
And we feel so ashamed and so embarrassed, that we should know. And so we're very, very harsh. One of the things that when I train money coaches, I say that one of the important characteristics that we have is a sense of compassion and empathy for people who have money problems. And what I found was I was the hardest one to find that compassion for. I had regrets for a long time thinking, I've lost so much opportunity, right? But that was, about 36 years ago, and a lot has changed in 36 years. And by the way, I am married for the 3rd time, and we just had our 24th wedding anniversary. So just like the money finally worked out, and I also finally got the right husband. So.
Oh, congratulations. Well, that's amazing. 24 years is impressive. That is not something to shake your head at. That's amazing. I'm going to pause just really quick, and I'm just going to do a quiet pause after we chat. It's not a big deal. We can work around it. You're hitting your table a lot.
Oh.
So yeah, just try to keep calm hands, and that'll make the editing process go a lot smoother.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
It's
just, well, it's okay. I love how because I really like people to be engaged when they're speaking, but that is one thing that's really hard to edit out. So
I'll just move back from my desk too.
Totally. No worries. And if you move back too far, I'll let you know if I can't hear you, like if you're
Oh,
too far
okay.
from your computer, but that
I
sounds
can,
good where you're at right now. Just be mindful of tapping on the desk.
yeah.
Um,
Thank you for reminding me.
totally. Now let's do a pause so that he sees kind of a long stretch, and then we'll start up again. Okay. So you had this kind of come to Jesus moment with your money, right? And I think there's a lot of folks that can relate to that and hitting hard times in life. And I mean, right now, right? We're in the middle of the pandemic. I'm sure there are so many people that have had to face money issues in new ways because they really haven't been forced to before now. So what followed that moment? Like, how did you actually dig in and change either your relationship to money or how you handled finances? Share with us what came after that.
So yes, it turned out it ended up really being kind of a miracle because it really led me to this amazing career. What I had to do at the beginning, I looked in the yellow pages. We didn't have Google then. And the only people they had were, people who would consolidate your debts and put you, budget counselors. And I tried those things, but it didn't work because all it was them saying, give me your money, we'll pay your bills, we'll give you a little bit to live on. And so that didn't work at all. And I had a hard time finding help. I knew that I wasn't ready for an accountant or a financial planner. So I really kind of started on my own. I went to therapy. I started reading books. There were very few books out at that time on money. And I embraced this process of I am going to get smart with money. And the amazing thing that came out of it is I thought, you know what? I bet there are a lot of people out there like me, right? And so I started having this idea, and I was dating John, my current husband at that point, and we had breakfast one Sunday morning, and I said, I have this idea that there are other people like me, and I feel I want to start a business helping people who have problems with money. And bless his heart, he looked at me and he said, oh, honey, you'd be so good at that, financial recovery. So he sort of named it, right? Because, thinking of recovery as something that's not working well, right? If we have an illness or surgery, we have to recover. Well, I had to recover. And so I started addressing it both on, well, all three. So from an emotional standpoint, spiritual and practical. So that was just sort of the start. And at the time, I thought I'd have to be a therapist to do this. So I decided to take a career exploration class at the City College in San Francisco, Dr. Kathleen Mitchell, and she had a class on career exploration. And I took the class, and my goal was, number one, to find out if I would be a good therapist, what it's going to tell me, and then how can I support myself while I go back to school to become a therapist. And one of the exercises that we did during that semester was we had to do a work history writing of every job that we've ever had, how we felt about it. And then we got to have a meeting with her. And I thought that it was talking about our values, our skills, and our interests. I thought, well, I have no skills. I do have interests, and I think I know what my values are. But I thought I'm not kidding. I thought, okay, if I was a lawyer or a dentist or a carpenter, and one of the things that she helped me see was going to work in a big industry where I knew nothing about computers, and to be able to really thrive. I mean, I did thrive in that environment. I hated it. I was miserable, but I thrived in terms of I started earning money, and it just felt so cool to be working in downtown San Francisco. But the other thing she said, do you have to be a therapist to help people with money? And she started talking about my people skills. And boy, that just planted a seed. And I really paid attention to that. And that was in 1980, like the end of 1987. 1988, I said, okay, I'm going to start a business called Financial Recovery, and I'm going to find those people like me. Now, what wasn't very smart thinking about that, if it was people like me, I wouldn't have been able to make any money.
Right. Finding people that are struggling to try to pay for your service, right? There's a lesson in there for a lot of people.
But what happened right away was I started meeting, I really did do a lot of my marketing. It was all word of mouth, going and meeting people and talking about what you did. We didn't have this type of technology then. And what I realized is that people from all walks of life and all income levels had problems with money, with their relationship with money. So I had to confront some of my fantasies. Like, one of my first clients, the first 3 months, was sent by a therapist. She had inherited $7 million. And now she's on her last 100 and she's been hemorrhaging it.
Wow.
So my fantasy, give me $7 million. I won't have money problems, right? And so I had to open my mind and my heart even bigger, to explore. And, I started doing workshops, being invited to speak for like inherited wealth organizations and that type of thing. So it was just, my world in terms of who needed help was all of a sudden very vast.
Yeah.
And
well, even when you said the name of your business, right? Financial Recovery Institute, I thought, oh, so many people can relate to that phrase or concept of financial recovery. One, either I needed it or I do need it, or, maybe some people don't yet know they need it because they have money, they're just not managing it well. But I think it's so relevant. And what you talk about, there's so much shame around money, around how we manage finances and money. It's just so true. It keeps people stuck, keeps people from asking help, from opening up and saying, here's what's going wrong.
And, that is one of the things that I think sets us up to end up in places that I ended up in, and other people as well, is that when we grow up with a lot of neglect or abuse or trauma in our life, and certainly all of the medical stuff I went through, and, not having a mother and dad to take care of me, there was a lot of that. And so what happens, we don't as kids say, it's their fault. They're not taking good care of me. I deserve to be taken care of. What we do is we internalize the idea that we are deeply flawed. And so if we're deeply flawed, how in the world can we be successful in life, whether it's in marriage and in business, with money or anything? And so I knew that the part of my process that was going to be so important, in addition to actually looking at the numbers and learning about the financial part, that had to absolutely heal those wounds of shame and deprivation that we grow up with. And I think that was one of the things I had the idea for my business was late 87, 88, I started doing all the work. And I had my very first client, February 2nd, 1989. And because nobody was doing this, and I had people writing newspaper articles, got a lot of attention right from the get-go. And it was a blessing for two reasons. One, I was able to support myself. But two, I had all these people who came to me were my teachers. I could see what they needed. For example, when I started, my first part of the process was just people and their personal finances. And then what I realized, that people who have their own business, they had a back door, it's like, oh no, I'll just do that to my business. Oh, and so I thought, oh, I have to include people who are business owners. We have to include a process that getting their arms around their personal finances, but also their business. And so my clients were my teachers. I could see what they needed. And, it's been all these years, and it's just been an absolute blessing. One of the things I love is having work that feeds my soul, because I think that's one of the things we all want. We want to have impact. We want to make a difference in people's lives. You like hearing about the guy where he was able to shed that 50-pound backpack, and my story, and, Michael Ann's story about how good it feels to do all of this.
Yeah.
So I just always felt like I kind of had a guardian angel. And so my business just kept growing and expanding. And then the really cool thing, the woman, my very, very first client, said, this has made, after a couple of years, she said, this has made such a difference in my life. I want to do what you do. Will you train me? And I had several clients go through that. And so eventually what I created was the World Class Money Coach training money coaches internationally. And in the early days, they had to fly to San Francisco. But now, we can do this
right anywhere.
We've got the technology, right?
Yeah, it's amazing. So What would you describe is the difference in the work you're doing? You talk about getting a lot of traction early on and getting some exposure in the media. What was different about your approach versus what other people were doing at the time?
One of the main things was really trying to identify the emotional components that were driving people's behaviors. The very first book I wrote, I had some lovely women all agree, including that teacher. When I started, I rented an office from a therapist. I got all the crappy hours, but it was a nice office. I felt proud of that. And the very first book I wrote was writing your personal autobiography, because I knew we had to really look at our history and to see how we develop the belief systems and attitudes about money that drive our behaviors. Did we grow up feeling that you better really be successful because the family's counting on you, or you better not be successful because we've got to protect dad's ego? I mean, their family messages, sometimes they're so loud, even though nobody has spoken them, they may as well be posted, on the refrigerator in big letters. And so I recognized right away from the beginning. And, I think because to be honest, I think one of the things that ended up being a gift for me, all that early deprivation and neglect and illness, I think it gave me really a gift of being able to have tremendous empathy and compassion for people. And somehow I have this mind that was just, okay, we need this, and then we need this, and we need this. So, over the years, the program has become very robust. But what sets it apart is, yes, we want to heal the shame. It's very important for people to really be connected to their money, but not just rear view mirror. That's what a lot of money stuff is, rear view mirror.
Yes.
And I have to say, I know there's some people that just instinctively are good with money, but I'm talking about people that want to improve their relationship with money. So I feel that getting totally conscious and connected to our money, but in doing that, we're also getting conscious and connected to what our deepest needs are. If we spend our money just on our wants and desires, well, this is the way I like to say it. You can never get enough of what you don't need, and you can never get enough of the wrong thing. So it is important to know that where we're going to spend our time, energy, and our money is going to be something that starts healing us by taking care of our needs. And so in the software MoneyGrit, and by the way, I love that we both have grit. And don't you love it?
Right. It's a good theme.
It is.
Yes. And so really quick on this concept of, looking at the emotional drivers or relationship to money, is your view, is it that money is just an extension of self? Is it one of the ways that we express ourselves? How do you talk to me a little bit more about that relationship between emotion and money, right?
Sometimes we mess up because we just don't know and we don't look. So I'll answer that question. Let me kind of back up a little. And so, for example, a lot of people track their money, rearview mirror, or they enter it in QuickBooks or rearview mirror, right? To really begin to understand our behaviors with money, what are those triggers? It's very important that our tracking is against a plan. So, one of the things I built into the process in the software, by the way, is when we create all of our categories, and I've got a very robust set of categories, we want people to customize them. But as they get to every category, whether it's in their personal finances or their business, every section you get to, you want to ask yourself, how do I feel about this part of my life? Because I want people to, like when you were talking about tolerations earlier, where people just kind of make do, they have a lot of incompletions, right? I've built into the software where we're really taking a thorough inventory of our business as we go through and create our categories and customize them. And then when we go through and do a spending plan. So for business owners, it would be, you get to professional development. It's like, how am I? I'm up on the latest things, right? And then we get to technology, hey, if we use technology in our business, are we working with old computers or old headsets or old microphones? So you want to go through and take a thorough inventory of every part of your business and in your personal life of your personal. I'll give you an example. So if, let's say somebody's in their home, and how do you feel about your home? When I never have anybody over, I'm embarrassed and ashamed of my home. So in that process of both creating the categories and starting to do a spending plan, we're creating a wants and needs list. What happens about wants and needs, some people, if they grew up where it was really unsafe to have needs because they would never be met, they may have no needs. Thank you very much. Everything's a want. The opposite extreme is someone who cannot delay gratification. Everything's a need, right? Yeah. So what I tell people when they're doing their needs and wants list, if you don't know whether it's a want or need, put it on both, because it will get clear over time. And so that's one of the things that sets it different, that when we start, we're not only looking at what we need to spend in areas of what we want to spend, but we're really looking at the quality of our business and of our personal life. And then what you do is you start planning. And for people to unlock their earning power, because these are the problems that people have. They're under earners. They don't believe that they really deserve. Overspenders, chronic debtors, so many business owners, it's feast or famine.
Yes.
Right. And so when we go through and do the plan, and this is where it's really super, super, super good and super smart, is if you're tracking against your plan and you deviate from your plan, now what you do is you say, okay, I planned on spending 200 here, but I spent 5. Most programs, you would just go and erase that original figure and put in 5. But we've built in the software, no, you don't do that. You're going to put it as an adjustment, and you're going to ask yourself these questions. Did I deviate from my plan, spend 500 instead of 2? Because I've just never tracked, and I really am guesstimating in terms of what things are going to cost. It might take a few months to get everything kind of figured out. Or did something come up, number 2, did something come up that I could not have anticipated? You will never in any of my work or in my books hear me talk about an emergency fund, because reality, besides earthquakes and floods and that type of thing, there are very few emergencies. Things are emergencies if we haven't planned for it. Like a car repair is not an emergency, but it feels like it. And so we really work with people on the different types of savings, so they begin to save for their periodic expenses. And then the other thing we ask is, so first was, did I not plan enough, just guessing? Second is, did something come up? Third thing is, I saw it, I want it, I bought it. To heck with my spending plan.
Impulse.
And if we do that, now here's where the work comes in, because then we want to track back. How was I feeling? What was going on in my life that I did that? And to me, without having that adjustment process, if you just go and change the initial number, you miss the opportunity of beginning to really understand, what those triggers are.
Yeah. Well, and that is, yeah, I think so often people are responding to triggers without really slowing down and thinking about them.
Exactly. So that's built into the process for one thing. And because, and then another thing that I have is, besides the adjustment process, that's one of the things that sets us apart. And the other is, it's one thing to break denial, looking at our spending 1 month at a time. But I built so that you can see side by side every month. It's not just a grand total, but it's really helping you see. And when you go, oh, I'm spending 50 here and 50 every month, all of a sudden it's like, no, that's not meeting my needs. And also probably not meeting my values, And we just, so many people are just in a money fog or in a money coma, as I was, like really deep asleep. And they just are so disconnected. So I think that the way out is really starting to work at that level. So I built software because, believe me, started out paper and pencil, then went to Excel, and then this is now the second web-based program. I would never have gone into the software business if there was a program that could accomplish these things for people who, like me, who really needed, and I'm saying maybe everybody doesn't need it. There are people that probably manage their money fine doing that. But for people who really are struggling, feast or famine, for business owners, not being able to take off when you're sick because you can't, not being able to take a paid vacation, those kinds of things. So those are some of the things that we built into the process.
Yeah. So MoneyGrit, just to clarify, you've built some of the teachings, and it sounds like even like the behavior modification part into the software.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
And is
That is
this
how it's designed.
right? Well, and I would imagine that a lot of it, like you say, I mean, even QuickBooks or some of the standard ones that are out there are really just reflections of what happened. Okay, that's what happened last month.
It's review. It's looking backwards. It's rearview mirror.
Right. It's a lot of reconciliation, like going to your bank account, going to, whatever accounts you're using and making sure that all the numbers are translating correctly and that they're all accounted for, but doesn't necessarily give you a plan, help you change course, modify
Exactly.
behaviors. Right. I mean, it's not to say that people don't modify things once they start observing it for a while, because I think, like you say, so many people are disconnected enough that they just don't even want to look at it. That feels too hard to look at it and get into that level of detail.
Yeah.
Right. What do you say to
Some
those
people,
folks who are like, oh, I probably need this, but it still sounds hard. It still sounds like a lot of work.
Mhm. This is what I would say. My prayers for you would be that you would fall in love with tracking your money and getting connected to your money, because it's where in the beginning, yes, it can be kind of painful to realize we don't have enough money to meet all of our needs. We've been spending our money rather unconsciously and it hasn't really worked out. But when we can start feeling, I'll give an example. My daughter Tammy, when she graduated from college, she called me one day. She had her first job and she said, Mom, do you want the bad news or the good news? And I said, well, I want both, of course. And she said, the bad news is my car just broke down and it was $750 to fix it. The good news was I had it in my periodic savings account. And so instead of being a victim, like, oh, this bad emergency happened, she had an old car. It's not, if you have an old car, you want to have some funds when your car breaks down. So it moves someone from feeling, oh my gosh, all these bad things keep happening to me, to feeling empowered. She actually felt good about spending that money. So I do have a whole process too, in terms of how we think about savings, because for business owners, a lot of business owners carry a lot of debt, and certainly a lot of people do in their personal life. And I have a process called Save Your Way Out of Debt, where we cannot just focus on credit cards. We have to focus on our relationship to saving money. Because if you think of a pyramid, a three-tier pyramid of savings, where it starts with, here's my savings for my periodic expenses. These are savings I'm going to spend. The next level is safety net. That's where I want to be able to have a paid vacation or take time off if I'm sick. And the third one is your investments. And so a lot of people have that, but if they don't have the safety net and the periodic savings, that pyramid is going to collapse, and it's going to take away a lot of their security. Maybe they'll have tax consequences and certainly lost opportunity in terms of that money growing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and yeah, the idea that, there are principles that work together. It's not just one strategy, but understanding the relationship of what needs to be in each bucket, how those all work to create a strong financial foundation is really important. I think people can get really deflated. And I was having a conversation with a gentleman who talked about his early days trying to figure out finances, where he'd finally saved $3,000, which at the time, this was probably, I don't know, quite some time ago. That was a big deal for him. And then he learned shortly afterwards that he had a $3,000 tax obligation, right? There went his savings, and it left him really deflated. And yet he's like, but if I'd been in conversation with people about money, could have changed the script a little bit to say, well, look, you had it in savings. Somebody without that in savings would have had to finance that. That would have come with interest, right? So, but it's, I think it can be challenging for people to know how to layer on those strategies if they don't have support.
And that's a beautiful story. And whoever said to him, you had it, it's just, then it was labeled like, if people just like, it's just savings, or like the message I got, save for a rainy day, whatever that means. However, if you name it, this is going to be money I spend, it then is a positive thing. But the interesting thing happens that I love, because that is the only way people are going to be able to dig out of the debt hole and be able to stay out of the debt hole, is having that periodic savings. And so what happens is, if people have never saved, they like it. So then they're tempted, I'm going to keep it there and then I will use my credit card again, right?
Mhm.
However, things are changing. We start changing. Our mindset starts changing. Our down deep, our feeling that we are worthy of receiving, that we want to have, we want to earn what we would like to earn. And I'll just give an example of this because I love this story. I have two stories, quick ones. One is if people are living in a lot of deprivation and they're not meeting their needs, right? Underneath all of that is this belief, I do not deserve. I'm not worthy of this. Thank you very much. So we have to start taking care of the needs because that starts pushing us in deeper. So it's on the surface. So there was one winter where I think I had 2 or 3 people come in, big storm. And one of the things that was on their needs list was new windshield wipers, right? Little thing, doesn't cost a lot. But changing it, I swear there were 3 people in that month that said, oh my gosh, I got my windshield wipers. I could see, and I just thought that's such a metaphor. It's such a good metaphor. And then another woman, a therapist, she's given me permission to tell this story. When we started working together, she had nothing in clothing, just clothes and nothing. And so I said, well, hey, let's make some broader categories. How about like workout clothes, lingerie? She said, oh, no, I don't do anything. Well, how's your lingerie? And she said, I never spend money there. And I said, how about we put something in for lingerie? And so, several months later, she said, I cannot believe this. I went from not being able to give myself underwear, giving myself underwear, and I now have $10,000 in the bank. I've never saved a dime. So when I say those little things and when we take care of them, it feels good. It starts changing things inside where we do open up to be way more able to receive.
Yeah. Well, that's a great example of ways that, we can use our money to take care of ourselves first, pay ourselves first, right? I mean, even the concept in business, right? Because I think so many business owners, this idea of rear view mirror accounting or financial approach happens to so many people in business. And it's like, well, whatever's left over is what they get to take home and pay themselves with. What, in your experience, for folks that turn that around, what tends to be a predictor of business success when it comes to financials?
I just love that. I love that leftovers idea, right? That's what a lot of people believe. They only deserve leftovers.
Yeah.
Tell me the question again.
Yeah. So for folks that are shifting, because I think a lot of, especially small businesses, entrepreneurs who, have built a business that is getting by, is paying the bills, but they really want to thrive, right? And you've mentioned several things that are interesting. One, how to unlock your earning power. I want to revisit that. But for folks that are moving away from this rear view mirror type of approach, what can they do instead that will really drastically improve their success?
I'll tell you a story of a client right after I created the business spending plan, the business version. This was still when I was in San Francisco, and he was a high-end photographer, but he lived like a pauper. His whole mindset was he was poor. And
the starving artist, right?
Absolutely. He just fit it to a T. And he also attracted women who wanted to take care of him. And so there's a lot of, yeah. So, but what we did, and this is crucial in people being able to overcome under earning or unlocking their earning power, is when we do the annual plan. I said that, one of the things that sets us apart is the adjustment process, but then there's this annual process. And this is crucial when a person wants to determine what they want to earn in a year. So you do your personal plan, you figure out what you need to pay yourself. And then when you go through and do a thorough spending plan for the year, and you look at what you may need in your business to grow your business, whatever your goals are. And, and then you look at what you're projected to earn. And when we did that, because he had never earned over like $60,000 a year. And for the field he was in, could have been much, much different. When we finished that process, what he realized is he only needed 3 more gigs to totally meet this plan that he created, that this is what I would like to have to live on. This will take care of my needs, my wants and desires. I can take care of myself. I can take care of my business. And we have to get to that. And when I wrote my last book, one of the things I saw, because I went through and I just reviewed a lot of my client files. And what I saw was people who had worked on both their business and their personal and separated them. So important to separate our business books from our personal, that with rare exceptions, their businesses had gone on to thrive. But we have to really do work about what we want to earn. And so that is what I found. And another thing I will have people do is write a thorough work history. I got the idea when I took that class, and then I expanded on it. And one of the things I had them write down is, for every job, what did they do? How did they feel about it? How were they paid? How did they feel about that? So that people can start realizing, like me, working 15 years for a dentist, with nothing, never occurred to me that anything was wrong with that. So we work on all these levels, and what happens as we're doing it, it just starts changing our insides, this belief. Everybody talks about mindset these days, and I think it's great. We have to change this, and to change this, we have to be grounded in the numbers as well.
Yeah.
Can't just talk about money. I mean, maybe some people, but not the people that I've worked with, and certainly not me.
Right. The point that you just made, we have to be grounded in the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's often one of the hardest pieces for people, to actually look at the numbers, right? I had a separate conversation with somebody who's a CPA who talked about why we have a numbers aversion, right? It's drilled into us since we're young. Like, there's so much negativity around numbers, grades in school, stepping on the scale. Like he talked about, he gave example after example of all the ways that we have a negative relationship with numbers.
Our FICO score, if things aren't great right now, right?
Right. Like numbers, are definitely a feedback mechanism. And what you say about getting really clear and grounded in the numbers. I remember it was actually a couple of years ago now. It was post kids for me. Like, I'd had my baby girl, which was a hard milestone to get to. I had a long, tumultuous journey to get her here, but I kind of refused to look at my numbers because we had so much medical debt until we got, I joke that I have $2 million babies, right? And it just took us a lot, and it cost a lot. And we were willing to do whatever it took to get them here, regardless of the numbers. And so I just kind of was like, well, I'm going to close the book on this for a while until I have the capacity to deal with it. Well, after having her, it was probably a year or so after her birth. Guess what I did? I sat down and I finally looked at my numbers, right? What did we need to be able to make to get by? What did we need to make to pay off all of our medical bills? Like, I looked at all the numbers, and I quickly realized why we had felt pinched. And it wasn't until I had done that, I literally got it down to, the dollar of what we needed to, and I analyzed it at different levels, but within days of doing that work, an opportunity showed up, and guess what it was? It was to the dollar what I needed in a year to cover our expenses. I mean, it was amazing how correlated those were. I mean, when I sat down and actually looked at the numbers, it blew my mind. But that was a really poignant example in my own life of what you just said, the importance of grounding yourself in the numbers, because until you have that, you don't have clarity. You don't know what you're working against, or what your goals are, or how to create it. And your brain can't get busy spotting those opportunities and creating the pathway until what is it? What is the pathway? What is that final number?
I love that story. And I've heard that story so many times. And the thing I would say is also, just that touched my heart. It's like, I can't look at the numbers because I can't stop this quest. I'm going to have these babies, right? So just feeling that compassion that sometimes we can't, and sometimes we need help by being able to do it. We need help, somebody holding our hand in that process. But I have heard that story so often. When we get clear, it's like, then,
boom, doors open, there's the path. Yes.
And I'll just say a couple more things about earning for business owners who have to set their own fee. right?
Yeah.
So whenever we are responsible for our own earning, it brings us face to face with our relationship with money. Very different than showing up and they pay you twice a month, right?
Right.
And a lot of it, when I was talking earlier about the fact that, people overdo, like overdoing, right? Overdo. Oh, I didn't say this. That was something I did earlier today. I'll just quickly say this. There are three things that really do contribute to deprivation.
Mhm.
One is doing without things that are really important. Two, making do, that type of approach to life, the incompletions, and then overdoing, that overspending, overworking. And what people do who don't earn enough, quite often they're delivering way more than they're charging for.
Yes.
And that leaves us depleted. So in setting our fees, I found that that's like a whole piece of work too, where we start out and I say that we've got to have an idea of our floor and our ceiling. Because if we set our fees too low and we're over delivering, resentment is going and burnout is going to set in. All right. However, that can be a challenge if we don't feel like we're really deserving. And that's why all of this work is designed to help people get to that place. But then the ceiling, if we set our prices too high and we don't, our fees, and we don't realize that we might have an earning ceiling, not something that we could see, but it's like, who do you think you are that you want to make that? And so, we want that floor to raise so that people feel they're really being paid for their services, no resentment, feeling good about it.
Yeah.
And then doing some work to get through the earning ceiling. When we do that, and then we really do these spending plans, now we see personal, this is what I need to pay myself. This is what I need to run my business. This is what I need to grow my business. When you're armed with that figure, now you can plan your work, how you're going to earn your money. And what I've seen with so many people is when they may have set their fees fine, but if they don't believe they deserve, they won't get their billing out, or if they get their billing out and then they won't be able to collect. Mm-hmm. So it's this, when people would call and say, well, I want to work on my enter earning, or I want to work on this, it's all together. They all work together as we do this process.
Yeah. Well, that you're right, that in small businesses, in entrepreneurship, you can be really quickly faced with that dilemma of how do I value myself, right? And how do I do it in a way that makes me feel good, that allows me to show up fully in my business, that allows me to stop the overworking. I know exactly what you're talking about when you say, and especially a lot of people that I serve, heart-centered, mission-driven, they just want to be serving their clients and doing amazing work in the world, and they very often overwork and over-deliver. Yeah. It's huge. It's huge.
And we want to be models. If you're parents, you want to be a model for your son to know, if you're a female, we want you to take really good care of yourself because you're modeling that for your son and your daughter. Yeah. And so important. And women, I've seen men do it as well, but we tend to give ourselves away and end up very, very depleted. And so, sometimes it'll motivate people to realize, but I'm not just hurting myself. I'm hurting, the people that I'm hopefully a model for. So radical self-care is a really important thing for all of us, whether we're business owners or not.
Yeah, no, I love that. Such an important reminder. And all of this ties into our self-worth and how we view that, right? Even, self-care is our relationship to self-worth and whether or not we deserve to take time out of our day for ourselves or treat ourselves to something. Karen, for folks that are listening, this is, there's so many gems that you've shared in this conversation. And I know you've got lots of resources. You have amazing books. You've got I'm sure some amazing resources on your website that can be shared. Where do you like for people to find you?
They're interested in MoneyGrit, MoneyGrit.com. My blog posts are at financialrecovery.com for now. I just really did a cool blog series on women and meeting their needs around clothes. It was about 4. It was totally cool. I loved it. And so either one, Karen at financialrecovery.com is the email, Karen at MoneyGrit, and then the two websites are the same.
Perfect. So we will share those. If you are listening, check out the show notes, legalwebsitewarrior.com/podcast. Karen will share your social media links there. We'll share both of your websites. What final either tips or takeaways do you want to leave with our listeners today?
Well, I sort of said it earlier, I really hope for you to fall in love with your money. And when people think, well, it takes so much time, one of the things to do is to ask yourself, is my money worth my time? Because my money touches all these areas of my life. So, I really hope you fall in love with tracking, and just know that through this process, this is where we start seeing possibilities, where we really truly move from surviving to thriving. That would be my hope for everybody.
No, I love that. And even that bit about time, the reverse of that is, what is it costing you in time not to pay attention to your money?
Absolutely.
Right? Because people often don't think about that, whether it's health, whether it's money, whether it's anything else, it's costing you something not to pay attention to it. Probably includes time. Karen, I'm so grateful for you. I'm so glad to know you. If you've been listening to my podcast, you've probably heard some ads for MoneyGrit, because I'm such a fan of Karen's work. And I really believe that financial independence, especially for women, is the key to changing the world. I believe it's that related. When people have financial independence, they are able to make right choices that align with their values and create the influence in the world that they want. It's all connected. So huge thank you for what you're doing. I'm so happy to be able to share this with my listeners. If you're listening, be sure to pop over, give us a rating and review. I'd love to know that you're there, and I'd love to have your help in helping other people find the podcast, including this particular conversation with Karen. Karen, I know we'll be talking soon. Thank you so much for coming on today.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.